Hey everyone, it's Ishara here, and in this video tutorial I'm going to be talking to you about integrating Spring with Hibernate. So I'm going to be using NetBeans IDE, but you can use any IDE that you prefer. So first I'm going to go ahead and open my NetBeans IDE. So I'm going to click on NetBeans IDE 8.0.2. So you can see it's opening, and once you open your IDE, what I want you to do is I want you to create a new project. So to create a new project, you can use this yellow button, or you can go to file and click on new project. So once you click on new project, you can see a window appearing. So in this window, I want you to select Maven, and what Maven does is Maven is a build tool, and it allows you to define the dependencies of the project. So I'm going to create a Maven project here. So I'm going to click on web application and click next. And now I can give a name to my project, and I'm going to name my project as Spring Hibernate example. So I'm going to type the name as Spring Hibernate example. And if you want to change the location of your project, you can use the browse button, but I'm not going to change the location of my project for the moment. Then I'm going to click next, and here you can give a server to your project. You can select any server that you prefer to use. You can give Glassfish, Tomcat, or any server that you prefer to use, but here I'm going to use Glassfish server 4.1 in my project. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click finish, and so now we have created a new project and our project is ready to be used. So now let's have a look at it. You can see several folders in our project. So now what I want you to do is I want you to right click on your project and go to properties, and then I want you to add some frameworks. So click on frameworks and add button, and then I want you to add Hibernate and Spring Web MVC as the framework. So select Spring Web MVC and then go again and add Hibernate. And when you are adding Hibernate, you have to give a connection to a database. So I'm going to give a new connection to a database. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to use MySQL connector, and now I have to create a database. So I'm going to go ahead and open my exam control panel, and I'm going to start Apache and MySQL, and then I'm going to click on admin of MySQL to go to my PHP MyAdmin page. So I'm going to click on new, and I'm going to give a database name here. So I'm going to name it as SpringDB. Yeah, SpringDB. So the database name is SpringDB. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click next after selecting my SQL connector as the driver. So here in this window you can see we can add a database. So as I gave SpringDB as my database name, I'm gonna type it here. So SpringDB, and I'm not gonna change the other things, and I'm gonna click next, and I'm again gonna click next, and I'm gonna click finish, and then OK. So now we have added the frameworks to our project. So now we have Spring and Hibernate in our project. So you can see the dependencies. So we have added Hibernate and Spring. So if you go to pom.xml, which comes with Maven, you can see all the dependencies that have been added to your project, and you can even use this pom.xml file in order to add dependencies to your project. So now let's see how our project looks like. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open web-ini folder. It's really important, and it has 3 XML files, and now let's have a look at them. So you can see there is application context.xml, dispatcher servlet.xml, and web.xml. These files are really important, and if I simply say application context.xml is like the mother of dispatcher servlet. So if you want, you can use application context.xml in order to configure Hibernate, but I don't want to make my life so hard by using two XML files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define dispatcher servlet as the context configuration as well. So I'm going to use one XML file for both. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy dispatcher servlet and paste it over there, and now I can get rid of that application context.xml file. So now let me go ahead and run our project. So let's see if it's working now. It's been deployed, and let's see if it's working. So you can see our project is working, and so you can see the index.jsp file of our project has been opened. So you can see our index.jsp has been opened, but you can see there is an extension which is htm, but I don't want that extension, so I will add slash as the URL pattern, and that's called slash mapping, and the previous one is called extension mapping. I don't want to use an extension, so I'm going to use slash there. So thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new package inside the source packages. So I'm going to name the package as com.ishara.controller. So our controller classes will be inside this package. So now I created our com.ishara.controller package, and the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to open our dispatcher servlet.xml and edit it. So let me go ahead and open our dispatcher servlet.xml, and inside it you can see there are several beans and namespaces and several other things, but I'm going to get rid of the things that I don't need to see in my code. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these things, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy a code that I have already written and paste it here, because I don't want to waste time typing the entire code. So I'm going to copy this code and paste it. Yeah, I'm going to copy this, and let me copy it, and I'm going to paste it inside my dispatcher server.xml file. So now you can see there is a big code, and don't worry, I'll be explaining you each and everything. So as the first thing, I'm gonna add some namespaces. I need context and MVC namespaces. So I'm gonna copy this line and paste it here, and I'm gonna rename this as context, and this also as context. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this line as well and paste it and rename as context. All these AOPs as context. So let me rename everything. So now I have added the namespace for context. So I have to add another namespace, which is MVC. I'm gonna follow the same thing here. I'm gonna rename, and I'm gonna copy this line as well and paste it, and I'm renaming. I'm doing exactly the same thing as I did before. So I'm renaming. So now that we are ready with our namespaces, let me go ahead and explain you what happens in each and everything in this code. So as the first thing you see, there is something called component scan, and what it actually does is it says your Spring container to look inside this particular package for components like controllers, service, or DAO. So you know that Spring container takes care of everything, and I think I forgot to create another package, which is the module package. So let me go ahead and create it because I have to explain it after some time. So let me go ahead and create it. So now let me get back to the place where I was. So as I said, Spring container looks for components inside this package. So the next thing is including property files. This line of code is used to include property files. So what they do is they allow you to define values for property, and we can go to other sources, and there you can see a file called hibernate.cfg.xml file. So this file consists of several property regarding Hibernate, and as I'm gonna define all these properties inside my dispatcher servlet, I'm not gonna need this file anymore. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a new property file and name it as application, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a code here. I'm going to copy paste a code here, and I will describe you the code later. So what I can do is now I can get rid of this hibernate.cfg.xml file, as I'm gonna define all this stuff inside my dispatcher servlet. So let me go ahead and copy this code in this file, and yeah, I'm gonna copy and paste it. So you can see we have given a URL for database, and I'm gonna give our actual database name, which is SpringDB. So I'm gonna type it. So now we have defined the values for our properties, and I will describe each and everything later. So this line of code is used to include our property file, and the next thing is MVC annotation driven. So this line of code means that your program allows you to use annotations. There are several annotations that you can use in your program, and using several annotations in this program as well. And the next line of code allows you to include static resources like CSS files, JavaScript files, and other static resources. So as I'm not going to use static resources in my project, I'm going to get rid of this line of code because I'm not going to use it. And the next thing is the view resolver. You know, every time your controller gets a request, it returns a string as the response. And this string is the name of the JSP page that should be displayed to the user. So what this view resolver does is it adds this prefix and suffix to the string that has been returned by the controller, and it eventually shows a JSP page to the user. So that's the basic function of this view resolver. And the next thing is defining the data source. And what this data source says is it defines the properties of the database. So you have to have driver manager data source class, and you have to put an ID here, which is data source, and you have to define several properties, and we assign values for these properties by using our property file. So if you go and open our property file, you can see we have assigned values to database.driver and database.url, and for everything that we have defined inside our data source. So you can see our database name and everything. So this is how it happens. So we define values, database values. So the next thing is that we have to define the session factory, and this is very important. We have to define the session factory inside our dispatcherservler.xml in order to configure Hibernate. And when we are using session factory, there are several things that we should know. So as the first property, what we do is we refer our data source, and then we have to add another one, which is Hibernate properties. So these are the things that we had inside our hibernate.cfg.xml file. So we have to define the values for these Hibernate properties. So we are going to add the values for these by using our property file. So you can see we have defined several things like show SQL, format SQL, and I'm not going to talk about these things in details because it might take a long time, but you can use different values to these property values. So you can see another thing called packages to scan, and this says your container, the Spring container, to scan this particular package for entity classes. And entity classes basically represent tables in your database. So this is what it means. So the next thing is defining the transaction manager, and you have to use transaction manager if you're using Hibernate. So this is how it is configured. And the next thing says you can use @transactional annotation in your project. So it's annotation driven. So that's the basic configuration required in order to use Hibernate and Spring. So we are almost done, and go ahead and create a controller class inside my com.ishara.controller package. So this controller is gonna get the request from the user, and it's gonna return something as the response. So I'm going to define it as a controller class by adding @controller annotation. And then what I'm going to do is I want my controller to return the index page every time I run my application. So I'm going to create a method which is let's say show index. Show index. So I created a method called showIndex, and this method, I want to map this method for every request with slash. So every time I run my application, it's gonna come to this method and execute this method and return something. So I'm gonna return index as the page. So let me write it. So I'm going to return index. So that's basically it. And I need one more thing. I want to add a dependency, which is MySQL connector for Java. You can either go to your pom.xml file and add the dependency, or you can go to dependencies and search for the dependency in the repository and find it. So you can see this is our dependency. So I'm gonna add it, and yeah, we are done. And now I'm gonna go ahead and yeah, you can see our dependency has been added to your pom.xml file. So everything is ready, and now I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of these guys. I'm gonna delete these two files, and I'm gonna open my index.jsp file and edit it. I'm gonna type this is the index page, and then I'm gonna run my project. So let's see if it's working. So it's still running, and yeah, it's working. So you can see our index page. So, and then next thing is that I want to show you how to add a record to our database by using this project. So I'm going to be doing it without using a form. I'm just going to show how to add an entry to the database by using Spring Hibernate. So Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create two more packages inside my source packages folder. So I'm going to create com.ishara.dao package and com.ishara.service package. So let me create those packages. So now I'm going to right click on my com.ishara.model package and I'm going to click on other, and then you can see a window appearing, and in that window I want to select persistence as the category and click on entity class. So I'm going to create an entity class. So entity class is pretty much like a database table. So I'm going to give the name, let me call it person, and I'm not going to create any persistent unit, and I'm going to click finish. So now I have created an entity class called person. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define this as a table. So I have to add table annotation. So let me type it, and the table name is gonna be person. So this is how we define it. And the next thing I want to do is I want to add two more attributes, which are name and age of the person. So I'm going to create two private variables. One is string and one is integer. So private string name and private int age. And the next thing I want to do is I want to define these variables as columns of my table. So I'm going to use column annotation, and I'm going to name each column with the names that I want to use. So I want to use the column name for name as name, and column name for age is age. And we're ready, and now I'm gonna go ahead and right click and select refactor and select encapsulate fields for getting setters and getters, and I'm gonna select both setters and getters here, and I'm gonna click on refactor. So now I have got the setters and getters for the variables that I have created. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create an interface inside my DAO package. So I'm going to call it person DAO, and inside this interface I'm going to create a method, a public method called add person, and I'm going to pass a person object into it. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to implement this interface by using another Java class, and I'm going to create a class inside this package. I'm going to call it person DAO IMPL. So I'm going to create the class and I'm going to implement person DAO by this class. So when we are implementing, we have to implement all the abstract methods of the person DAO interface. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to add two annotations, at repository and at transactional. So let me add those annotations to our class. I think I have made a little mistake here. Let me correct it. And the next thing I want to do is I want to implement all the abstract methods of the interface. So now I have got a method called addPerson, and what I want to do is I want to write the method body of this method. So let me go ahead and write the method body. Oh, before that we need an object reference of the session factory. Here I'm going to create an object reference of the session factory, and I'm going to auto wire it. So let me do it. And let me write the rest of the code and explain it. So in this code, what happens is I'm going to save a person object. If it is successfully added, then it's going to return an integer ID, and that's the basic idea about this code. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another interface inside my service package. So I'm going to name it as person service, and I'm going to create a public method called add person and pass an object to it, a person object to it. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to implement that interface by a Java class, and I'm going to call that Java class person service impl. So let me go ahead and create it. So now that we have created our person service impl, and I'm going to implement person service interface by it, and I'm going to add several annotations to it after implementing all the abstract methods. I'm going to add service and add transactional annotations, and then what I have to do is I have to wire an object of person DAO to this class, and I'm going to do it by using @autowired annotation. So now what I have to do is I have to write the body of this method, and this method returns an integer. If a person is successfully added, it returns something which is not 0. So I'm going to call the add person method of our DAO impl, and this method is going to return an integer. So the next thing is I'm going to write the code inside our home controller. So let me copy these and paste it. And now what I want to do is I want to return the success page if the person is successfully added to the database. So when a URL like /add comes to the controller, then it's going to execute this method. So let me write the code for it. So I'm going to create an object of person and set values for the name and age. I'm not going to use a form in order to get these values because it's something way beyond this. So I want to make it so simple. So I'm passing my own values by just passing values to these setter methods. And now I have to call the add person method of our person service impl. So for that I'm going to wire an object of person service. So now I'm going to call that method and pass this person p object to that method. And then if the integer returned by the method is equal to 0, I'm gonna show fail page, and if it is successful then it's not gonna return 0, so it's gonna show the success page. So now let me go ahead and add the URL to my index.jsp file. So let me write it. And the URL is gonna look like something like this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create two JSP pages, success page and fail page. So I'm going to add it successfully and failed to add. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my property file and change this to create drop, or you can make it create. So now we are almost done, and if you go to our database you can see we have no tables right now. So when we are running our application we want tables to be created. So now we are ready with our application, and let me go ahead and run it. So you can see our application is working, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on our add person link. So let me go ahead and click on it. So now you can see we are in our success page, and that means that our record has been added to our database. So let's go ahead and have a look at it. So now you can see there is a table in the database, but we didn't have one before. So you can see our entry has been added. We added Jack, who is 25 years old, so our entry has been added to the database. So this is how you use Spring and Hibernate. So I hope you guys got something out of this video tutorial, and I hope to see you guys soon, and thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave your comments below. Thank you so much.